Hi everyone. We find ourselves in the last days of the Lenten season, which means Holy Week will soon be, or depending on when you're watching this, already is here. We're also, of course, in the midst of this pandemic, if for no other reason you can tell by my sort of apocalypse level hair that's getting a little out of control. So as you can probably imagine, due to circumstances well beyond our control, this year's Holy Week commemorations are going to be different from what you're used to. And for one of these things I'm about to describe, that's entirely intentional. This year, at First Pres Elgin, we're going to be holding 3 services for Holy Week. Dinner church on Maundy, Thursday at 6 over Zoom, a prayer service on Good Friday that will be available throughout the day, and our Easter Sunday morning service at 10:30 on Zoom. Let me take a few moments to walk you through these 3 services. First, for me, the big one, Maundy, Thursday dinner church. Friends, you have no idea how excited I am to introduce all of you to dinner church. And I was very excited to get to do that with you in person. It's really my favorite way of doing worship, and it's one that I've been privileged to be part of in several different communities in the decade or so I've lived in Chicago. It's a way of doing worship that recalls the earliest church experiences. Worship around the table at dinner time. Essentially during the service, we gather in prayer and song, we break bread together, we eat dinner together, we hear and discuss a biblical text together, we pray, we share the cup together, and we depart in peace. It's perfect for a Maundy Thursday. Now it's not, I need to emphasize, a Seder. I am not Jewish. Our community is not Jewish. And therefore, as we have not been invited by any of our Jewish friends to participate as a community in one of their Seders, that's not something that we are going to be doing. At first, we do try our best to not participate in cultural appropriation. And dinner church, while recalling the Passover meal of Jesus and his disciples, is one whose roots are in the 1st and 2nd century Christian practices of the agape meal. And it's a really great way of doing church, in my biased opinion. Now, as you can probably guess, we're not going to be doing that in person. Rather, we're going to be gathering together over Zoom, live from my dinner table to yours. And the service will be BYOD. Bring your own dinner, if you'd like to eat. So please, join me on Thursday at 6. Let's have dinner and fellowship together over Zoom. Now you might recall that I mentioned when I was first describing dinner church that there is a breaking of bread and a sharing of cup. This often is a communion service when I've done these in the past, and just one that I would argue is more reflective of how the first Eucharists were celebrated as opposed to the far more ritualized version that we are used to some 2 millennia later. And after discussing this with Session, I've decided to go ahead and offer you the service. And we've decided that we're going to do this virtually, but with a celebration of communion. So this will be quite new for us, both because we've never done dinner church before as a community, but also because we'll be doing the sacrament from the comfort of our own homes, while I'm leading it from the comfort of mine. And that's new for us. It's new probably for almost all of us as Christians. I know of a few churches that have tried doing things over the past, but for us in the PSUSA, this is not something that has certainly ever been normal or really done as far as I know. As we tread unfamiliar waters together as a planet, so we tread them as a church. And I recognize that this is a big deal, and some of you might find doing that to be very problematic, and that's okay. So please allow me to take a moment to try to answer a few questions that might pop up regarding whether or not we could be or should be doing this or how we would go about doing this. First of all, can we do this? Well, the very simple question to that very the very simple answer, to that very not simple question is yes. Our denomination's stated clerk issued an advisory opinion on March 24th that states that during extraordinary emergency circumstances such as these, our session can allow us to do that. Now next you may ask, how can we do this? Especially if we're not going to be sharing the same bread and cup. Because of course, since we're socially isolating ourselves, so to speak, we're not going to be sort of driving around with me saying, here, take some bread, drink from this common cup, and then going to the next person's house and the next person's house and so on. Also, that would take a very long time. So how can we do that? Well, the elements of communion are the very common and really very simple elements of bread and wine, as expressed in the stories of Jesus eating with his disciples in that last meal. Now you might have noticed, if you're paying attention, that we don't actually pour wine into our cups when we do the sacrament together in church. And that's because quite a while ago, we, along with a lot of other Protestants, decided to switch over to grape juice in order to make communion more accessible for people who don't want to be drinking or perhaps have problems with drinking alcohol. Theologically, we're basically doing that for the same reason that we now ensure that all the communion bread we use when we do communion together is gluten-free. That is how we have decided as a community to do communion today in a way that is most faithful for us. And the elements that we use are those very ordinary elements of everyday life. The bread that we eat is simply the bread that whomever was buying it for that Sunday has bought for us from the store or a bakery. And the juice that we drink is simply grape juice that, again, whoever was buying it when we needed to buy it bought at the store. And that follows exactly what Jesus did with his disciples during the Last Supper. He took the very ordinary, a regular loaf of bread and a cup of wine, a staple food and a festival drink, and he blessed them. And in that blessing, in that breaking, in that pouring, something happened. Just as something happens when we do the same. Just as something will happen when we, with those elements common to our own homes, the bread we have in our kitchens, or the crackers if that's not available to you, or the tortillas as I have done communion with in Guatemala, and the juice or the wine or the milk or whatever we normally would be drinking for dinner. And when we take those ordinary elements and bless them, we can participate in the sacrament in the same way that we do in church. And while this is certainly an extraordinary way for us to take communion together during an extraordinary time, it does recall what Jesus was doing with his disciples in the upper room. Using what he had available to him, he blessed them, and in doing so added meaning and made it a sacrament. And so, because we are unable to break bread and share cup in the manner to which we are accustomed during this extraordinary time, and, well, frankly, because this is a new for us service anyway, and so it's all kind of a new thing, I'm going to invite us to do as Jesus and his disciples did. Taking the very ordinary from our own cupboards and pantries and shelves and fridges, and together we will bless them, and we will take them into ourselves, as we do almost every first Sunday, and they will be for us the communion of the body and blood of our Lord, partaking in what he has to offer from his table. This will be new for us, but as we are unable to meet together in person, it will be what we do. And I really hope that it will be a wonderful experience for you all. So please join me on Thursday at 6, from my table to yours, as we together explore a new way of being church, even during such a time as this. It will be BYOD, and it will also be a double BYOB. Bring your own bread and bring your own beverage for the cup. Moving on to the rest of Holy Week. I'm going to be putting together a prayer service for Good Friday. Now, this is not going to be live streamed like the other two services are. Rather, it will be recorded like any of my prayer shorts you may have seen. I'm going to post it on Friday morning so that you can pray when it's convenient for you. Whether you choose to do so in the morning, when Jesus was said to have been crucified, or during the afternoon, when Jesus was said to have died, or in the evening as congregations typically commemorate the occasion. And I hope that this prayer time, when we recognize the darkness of death itself, might be a blessing for you in this dark hour. And finally, Easter morning. You know, it really is unfortunate that we won't be back in the sanctuary for Easter Sunday. Our egg hunts are going to have to wait for another time, although I suspect that some of our kids will still have an opportunity to enjoy some chocolate, and maybe even some of us older kids too. Rather, when we come together to worship on Easter morning, we will do so as we have over the past few weeks, over Zoom. I would encourage you to invite those among us who haven't yet attempted to join us online to do so either over the internet or to call in using the call-in number and to listen to the service. Now, as I mentioned last Sunday, we're going to try to do a fun video resurrection project where we make videos on our phones or tablets that are very short. That just show or tell this little story about resurrection or new life. And I would encourage you to all think about that and do that as we approach Easter. And even if you don't get a chance to do that in the next week or so, if you feel so inspired, please do so during the Easter season. I would love to put together a collage of our short stories of resurrection to then present them to us all when we're back together again in church, in person. So we can celebrate the abundance of new life and blessing in our lives, even as we lament and grieve those who we have lost and will lose, and those who are and will suffer due to this pandemic and its effects. While this Holy Week will be different from any of those that you or I have probably ever experienced, I hope it will be a blessing for us. May we use this time, one of those times in the liturgical year when we recognize that things get bad before they get better, where we find that the night is the darkest just before the dawn, that we can find ourselves before our God and really wrestle with what it means to follow Jesus in such a time as this. For this is a time, both in our lives and liturgically, of lament, especially as we get later into the week. And it's okay to feel what you feel and to bring that with you to God. Because no matter what, God is with us all. God knows the depths of sorrow and grief and isolation and fear that times like these can bring. For in Jesus, our God has been there too. If you need someone to talk to, please reach out. We all love each other, and we are all one family, even if we're not going to have an opportunity to see each other face to face for a little bit longer. I hope you all stay healthy, friends. I'm praying for you, and I hope to hear from you, and I hope to see all of you online in the coming week. Peace be with you all.